welcome to another episode of Codovision, where you feel the TV power through audio. I am Mark Codo, aka Codoman, your Codovision host. For this episode, I'm going to take a break from talking about pilot episodes and I'm going to transition into a different television topic. This time, I'm going to talk about my very first television special. Now, part of this episode, I will talk briefly about what is a television special. But first, I want to tell you what television special I'm going to talk about. This one's going to be coming from SpongeBob SquarePants. Y'all are probably wondering which television special from SpongeBob SquarePants I'm going to talk about. There's definitely a few of them out there, but for this episode, I'm going to talk about the episode titled "Have You Seen This Snail?" otherwise known as "Where's Gary?" With this episode of "Have You Seen This Snail?", this episode was a part of its fourth season of SpongeBob SquarePants. It's also the third episode of the season 4 as well. So basically, this is basically taking place post movie SpongeBob, to which the SpongeBob SquarePants movie came out in November of 2004. Now, as for season 4 of SpongeBob SquarePants came out in 2005. So that's basically almost a year. So basically about a year after the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. And this is basically early on into season 4, by the way. Have You Seen the Snail from SpongeBob SquarePants is a TV special, or should I say SpongeBob SquarePants Special, I should say. This SpongeBob SquarePants Special, or television special, follows Gary, who is SpongeBob's pet sea snail, who runs away from home after feeling neglected by a distracted SpongeBob and is adopted by a new owner. After realizing the error of his ways, SpongeBob sets out with his best friend Patrick Star to search for his adored pet and bring him back to his rightful owner. So that's basically the synopsis of the episode. Now I will break down this episode, and before I do that, I just want to give in a brief my brief history on what a TV special is, and then of course my brief background with SpongeBob as well. So, starting with the TV special, otherwise known as television special, or rarely known as television spectacular, is a standalone television show which may also temporarily interrupt episodic programming normally scheduled for a given time slot. Some specials provide a full range of entertainment and informational value available via the television medium, whether it's through news, drama, comedy, variety, cultural, among many other things, including in various formats, whether it's with live television, documentary, studio production, animation, film, and of course in any viewing lengths for short films, feature films, miniseries, and telethons. Now, of course, this can be described in many things for television specials, like whether it's one-time comedy shows, extended episodes of TV shows, or even celebrity profiles, which includes interviews or tribute specials, even animated cartoons. Plus, you also got irregular sporting events as well, whether it's the Olympic Games or the Super Bowl, even award shows like the Academy Awards or even the Golden Globes, plus religious specials as well, among many other things too. And to me, the SpongeBob episode "Have You Seen the Snail?", while it does fall into the animated category, but also it falls into the extended episodes of TV shows category, because "Have You Seen the Snail" is basically an extended episode, because now several SpongeBob episodes are very episodic. Like you have episode A and episode B, but there are times where the episode itself is extended. So instead of an episode A and episode B, it's just an extended episode that serves as a television special. And "Have You Seen the Snail?", or should I say "Where's Gary?", is a prime example. Now, with my brief history with SpongeBob SquarePants, I have seen multiple episodes of this show. I started watching SpongeBob SquarePants when I was during my last 3 years in elementary school. When I was little, my art teacher back in Ranchview Elementary School, he loves watching SpongeBob SquarePants, In fact, me and my brothers, we were a part of this after school club where we get to draw out different cartoons. And one of the cartoons we get to draw is different characters of SpongeBob SquarePants, and it was a fun club to be a part of. I really enjoyed it. But that's enough about that. Now going back to my brief history, I have seen multiple episodes of SpongeBob SquarePants. I've seen the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, the very first one, and of course there are also sequels as well. For example, the SpongeBob movie Sponge Out of Water, and the SpongeBob movie Sponge on the Run. And then of course there is also a fourth film on the way that is set to be released on December 19th of 2025, titled The SpongeBob Movie: Search for SquarePants. And that's basically it on the movie side. And then of course you got specials like Have You Seen This Snail? And then of course you also have the SpongeBob Christmas special as well, among many other specials as well. But Have You Seen This Snail? It is one of the few popular SpongeBob specials that I have ever seen because to me, Have You Seen This Snail? It's basically a SpongeBob special that really hits you in the field, because the title of this episode is Have You Seen the Snail? It's just basically Gary the Snail running. It's basically Gary the Snail running away from SpongeBob because SpongeBob is SpongeBob is being so neglectful he forgets to feed his own snail, because SpongeBob, being neglectful that he is in this episode, in that special, he ignores Gary because he was playing this he was doing this paddle ball challenge and he's being distracted by it rather than paying attention to his own pet snail. But anyway, this will definitely into the breakdown of SpongeBob SquarePants. Have You Seen This Snail? And the special opens up with a few seconds of Patchy the Pirate basically presenting the audience to this special. Like Patchy the Pirate, who's being played by Tom Kenny, he says, "Ahoy! It's a SpongeBob SquarePants special!" He's letting everybody know that, hey, everybody, this is a SpongeBob SquarePants special. Dun da 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 da. And obviously, you got the song title, which is the SpongeBob SquarePants theme, and then you have the title card that says, "Have you seen this snail?" And then it also features guest stars, which includes Amy Poehler and musician Stu. So you get two special guest stars, Amy Poehler and Stu. And this episode was written by Aaron Springer and Paul Tibbitt. And of course, the animation was done by Alan Smart and Tom Yasumi, and with Aaron Springer as the storyboard, including Paul Tibbitt as the supervising producer as well. Now, of course, we jump into the now. Of course, as I mentioned, Have You Seen This Snail? Is the third episode of season 4. And now, of course, you have characters. As I already mentioned, there's Patchy the Pirate, who was in the opening. We also get SpongeBob SquarePants, Patrick Star, including Squidward Tentacles, among many other fish characters as well. But also, the main character in this episode is Gary the Snail. Like SpongeBob SquarePants, in my opinion, for this episode, he's basically the supporting character in this episode rather than the main character, because the title alone says, "Have you seen this snail?" It's referring to Gary the Snail. Gary's your main character in this episode. So let's dive into the actual breakdown. The episode opens up with SpongeBob bringing home snail food to Gary the Snail. When he reaches home, he gets a package containing the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy paddleball set. Also in it is the Dirty Bubble Challenge, requiring him to do 29,998,559,671,349 hits in a row with the paddleball. He gets so carried away with the game that he forgets to feed Gary, and SpongeBob gets angry with him for distracting him from his game when he wants food. And for a few times, SpongeBob is like, "Gary, I'm trying to do this challenge." But Gary is like, "Meow, feed me, SpongeBob." So basically, Gary's trying to get SpongeBob's attention because Gary's hungry. Like SpongeBob, Gary's right in front of you. He's hungry. He wants his dinner. Like, he's hungry, SpongeBob. Why aren't you paying attention? Come on, man. Like, take a break from the challenge. Go feed your pet snail. Like, come on. It's not that hard. But unfortunately, out of hunger and desperation for Gary, Gary tries to get him to feed any possible way, but this only annoys SpongeBob even more. And with that being said, SpongeBob neglectfully yells at him to leave him alone. Gary, who is heartbroken and hungry, abandons SpongeBob and leaves the town. Like Gary runs away from home, right? And he decides to now and not only that, he also wants to find a new caretaker. Like somebody who understands Gary. Somebody who understands Gary. Not just like because his name is Gary, but also the fact that Gary is a pet snail. Gary's a pet snail. And from a pet owner perspective, like this really hits hard. Like not realizing that your pet has run away, but also realizing that someone like SpongeBob SquarePants has neglectfully ignored his pet. And I don't think it's the only time SpongeBob has been neglectful to Gary. There was an episode before the SpongeBob SquarePants movie where he was pushing Gary to the limit to compete in a snail race, and SpongeBob pushes Gary to the limit to get ready for that race, only for Gary to fall behind and crash into the wall. To which SpongeBob was like, Gary, you can stop now. But like, you feel his sense of remorse and regret of how he treated Gary, and this was at the race after training him. Even Gary to the point was like, meow, telling SpongeBob like, SpongeBob, dude, you pushed me to the limit. You pushed me to the limit. You pushed me so hard. You were pushing me too hard on this. And this was from a pre-movie SpongeBob episode, mind you. And that's from season 3, mind you. Like, this is from season 3 where Gary was competing in the race, and that was when SpongeBob was pushing Gary too hard. This episode, have you seen the snail? SpongeBob completely ignores him. He ignores Gary. Like, why, SpongeBob? Why? SpongeBob's supposed to be a caretaker, a good pet owner to Gary the snail, and he just ignores him in this episode. Like, why, SpongeBob? Why? But anyway, Patrick Star comes to see SpongeBob, but it turns out that he's still trying to complete the Dirty Bubble Challenge. Patrick reveals to SpongeBob that he won the challenge but lost the trophy. SpongeBob realizes that he has not fed Gary yet, and after finishing with food, SpongeBob calls for Gary, only to find out that Gary is gone, as he had been doing the challenge for a week. Give or take maybe 10 days, according to Patrick Star. And even Patrick kind of realizes too, because SpongeBob asks Patrick, hey Patrick, how long have I been doing the Dirty Bubble Challenge? And Patrick's like, probably a week, give or take maybe 10 days. And Patrick realizes this by eating this clump of milk, because the milk has been out for like, I want to say about 10 days, because if you look real closely at the jug that SpongeBob has, there is a couple of clumpy marks on the milk, and that indicates that milk has been left out for at least a week, maybe 10 days. And when Patrick eats it, he has this reaction knowing the fact that this milk tastes so sour. And it's so clumpy too. Like, this clump of milk that Patrick ate, or drank I should say, is so clumpy, and it tastes bad too because it got soured and let out to rot for like 10 days. That's when SpongeBob realizes like that he's been doing this paddleball challenge for 10 days and realizing that he forgot to feed Gary. He thought it was only for a couple of hours because he sees some dust on Gary's food bag on the front porch because he left it on the front porch. And from that dust, he is like, ooh, I left that out for a couple of hours. Let me blow off this dust. Dude, SpongeBob, I don't think that was a couple of hours for that amount of dust to grow on that food bag. But literally, SpongeBob forgets to feed his pet snail Gary, and realizing that Gary has run away. So SpongeBob has become horrified and remorseful for himself. Then he goes on a desperate hunt to find Gary. And of course, SpongeBob and Patrick do that. SpongeBob and Patrick do that. They look around. The two walk around SpongeBob's house to find Gary, and they try to look into Squidward's place, to which Squidward has a cameo in that episode. And then the last thing they checked was in the mailbox, and the mailbox was full until SpongeBob finds a letter from Gary the Snail. Gary wrote this in Snail, and SpongeBob understands Snail too. Just to throw that out there. So SpongeBob reads the letter, realizing like, oh, but it's been a fun few years, but now I had to move on. Don't bother coming to look for me because I know somebody will remember to put food in my bowl and feed me. And this hits SpongeBob very hard because he came to the realization that he has become a neglectful pet owner. Like, yeah, SpongeBob in this episode, well, I'm pretty sure, aside from the snail race episode, I'm pretty sure there were a couple episodes before that where SpongeBob was being neglectful too. But in this episode, he was being neglectful, but also at the same time remorseful as well. Even Patrick Star agrees with what Gary wrote too. He's like, you see it right there, all plain and simple, all in black and white. Gary has left you behind, finding a new owner to take care of him. Yeah. SpongeBob at this point, there are times where I feel like SpongeBob has become so unlikable to the point where he ignores his pet snail, right? I like how throughout the episode he decides to like find him. Like he's putting an effort to find Gary the snail. Like even after he read the letter, he keeps going on his search. He keeps going on his search to find Gary. Like he goes through Bikini Bottom to find Gary the snail. And of course, we still see Gary walking around, walking through a desert until he reaches a town far away from Bikini Bottom. He goes into an alleyway where he finds nachos, but he gets scared off by a bunch of alley snails who literally scared him. And a couple of them are like, "Well, look who came to dinner." But Gary runs away, and the other snail's like, "Guess you didn't like nachos." Like, I'm just like, dude, you guys scared this poor snail away. Wow, what a nice way to greet a snail in the alley, huh? There were three snails that scared off Gary, and one of them said, "Look who came to dinner." Huh, guess you didn't like nachos. Like what? What a way to greet a new snail to the alley, huh? But of course, Gary runs away until he gets picked up by a stranger. Although this stranger turns out to be an old lady who mistakes him for another snail named Miss Tuftsy, and this old lady is being played by Amy Poehler. And for the most part, this old lady seems to be nice to Gary. Like she takes him home, she warms him up with this blanket and a heater, and feeds him some cookies. And throughout the episode, you do see that she looks kind, she is sweet, she is humbled. She's even got a picture framed of her and a bunch of other snails as well. So it seems as though that this old lady is nice and a better caretaker for Gary the snail, meaning like she's basically better than SpongeBob. Or is she? We won't know until later on. The next day at the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob is 15 minutes late to work, according to Mr. Krabs, who unintentionally motivates him to leave and work harder to get Gary back rather than convincing him that doing the hard work he normally enjoys doing at the Krusty Krab will solve whatever problem he has like he intended. So SpongeBob and Patrick start to search for him all over town. I do like this bit where Patrick wakes up to all the office supplies falling on top of him. He's like, "Oh, the apocalypse is here! Of all the office supplies falling from the sky!" And SpongeBob is like, "No, Patrick. We're gonna make posters to find Gary." And yeah, that's basically the whole point of that. SpongeBob and Patrick making posters to find Gary. So then SpongeBob and Patrick started to make posters, go into town, put up posters, and of course Patrick, being the dumb starfish that he is, gets distracted by scented pine cones. He goes inside the store. He finds this old lady who is right next to Gary the snail, and Patrick is like, "Oh, old lady, I'm looking for scented pine cones. Have you seen it?" But this old lady is like, "Well, unfortunately, Sonny, I have already gotten the rest of these scented pine cones. Patrick is upset that the old lady's got the scented pine cones, and Patrick's like, it's okay, pine cones. I'll miss you so much. And then he walks away. He sees Gary and says, hey, Gary. And Gary is like, meow? And a part of me is just like, what? You didn't like want to realize that, oh my goodness, I found Gary. But of course, I mean, you got to keep the plot going. This is basically Patrick being distracted in this situation. Of course, he leaves the store and he goes with SpongeBob to continue their search for Gary. And of course, during this entire search, during the rest of his during this entire sequence, there's a song playing in the background. It's called "Gary Come Home," and this is being played by musician Stu. And this is a guest appearance from Stu, although vocally because of the song. I am not gonna lie, this is, in my opinion, the saddest SpongeBob song. SpongeBob at this point has, in my opinion, hit rock bottom in this episode, realizing that he has missed his important pet. Like, Gary the Snail is so important to him. And the lyrics in this song, like, the lyrics do hit hard. Even though it's a short song, but let me talk about a few lyrics. Gary, now I know I was wrong. I messed up. Now you're gone. This is describing SpongeBob being so messed up and knowing that he's wrong and now realizing that Gary is gone. And then the song continues with, Gary, I'm sorry I neglected you. Oh, I never expected you to run away and leave me feeling this empty. Your meow right now would sound like music to me. Please come home, 'cause I miss you, Gary. Gary, come home. Yes, SpongeBob has neglected Gary. He didn't even think that Gary would run away. I mean, I wouldn't think that. I mean, let's be honest. I wouldn't think that too if I was in SpongeBob's situation, being distracted by this Powerball challenge. But when you're being distracted like that and not realizing what else is going on with the other person or pet in the room, like, you did something wrong. And of course, your meow right now would sound like music to me, because Gary's meow, to which in the SpongeBob world, the snails are the cats, while the worms are the dogs in the world of SpongeBob. Because their barks and meows are basically like music, if you really think about it. And then, of course, Gary, come home. I mean, he's like, this literally, it's like a call for Gary to come home, because SpongeBob really misses him. He messed up big time. And then, of course, this other verse right here. More than a pet, you're my best friend. Too cool to forget. Come back, 'cause we are family. And forgive me for making you want to roam. And now my heart is beating like the saddest metronome. Somewhere I hope you're reading my latest 3-word poem, Gary Come Home. Dude, that really hits hard. Like, this song is describing a pet as, you're more than a pet. You're my friend. You know? You're describing a pet as your best friend in the house. Of course, who couldn't forget? I mean, who couldn't forget? But unfortunately, SpongeBob did forget. You should never forget your pet. Do not forget your pets. And then, of course, SpongeBob asking for forgiveness for making you want to roam around, and now his heart is beating like the saddest metronome. That is probably the best way to describe how sad someone can be. Like, your heartbeat is like a metronome that is pumping with sadness, regret, and of course, remorse as well. And your heart is beating like a metronome. But hearing that lyric, your heart beats like a metronome, that is really the best description that I have ever heard in a very sad song. So after the song, Gary and the old lady are back at the house, and she's gonna cook up some meatloaf, and Gary was about to go to the bathroom on those old pile of papers, but thankfully the old lady had some extra paper from Patrick's Star, and Gary sees the paper. He noticed that they're all posters saying, Gary, please come home. Where is Gary? Gary, I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. I'm a moron. I really miss you. Please come home. You see stuff like that, right? You see that, right? In those posters, like saying like SpongeBob, and this is all from SpongeBob. SpongeBob is so sorry. He regrets what he has done, and he is begging for Gary to come home. We get a moment from SpongeBob where Gary is thinking of SpongeBob through his mind, and SpongeBob's like, Gary, please come home. Go, Gary, go, go, go. Until the old lady is like, you stay right there, Miss Tuftsy. The meatloaf is almost done. Gary's like, bruh, whatever. So Gary was about to leave. Was about to leave. He opens his door, to which he thought it was an exit, but no, it was a closet full of snail shells from deceased snails, and Gary puts the pieces together, realizing that this old lady is overfeeding him, and he realizes that she is trying to fatten him up to eat him. Like, dude, this old lady, from the first point that we saw this old lady in this episode, like, she was a nice old lady to begin with, but after realizing at this point that after realizing that this old lady is over feeding Gary, that way she can eat him, and to the point that this lady has become a psychopath. Like, like, literally. You see the evil look on her face to when she pulled out this batch of cookies in front of Gary, like saying, "Oh dear, the meatloaf is not quite ready yet, but don't worry, Grandma knows how hungry you are, so she baked up a batch of cookies." Like, literally, you see that evil grin in that grandma's face in that scene. And then what comes next is Gary's belt breaks with a gut coming out of his stomach, and of course another gut coming out of the back, breaking part of his shell to which I don't know how that works, but whatever. And then what's next is the portrait coming to life with all the snails screaming, "Run!" And literally Gary pulls himself out of the shells, causing him to roll across the floor and up on Grandma's plate of cookies and into the air. Grandma throws the cookies like shurikens to Gary, but he only looks at them with dreary eyes before rolling outside through the snail door, while the cookies get stuck in the door similar to axes. And Grandma then pulls out a plate of deviled eggs too and chases after Gary. Where did Grandma get those plate of deviled eggs? Hell's Kitchen? And then Gary runs away from this grandma, and of course the old lady was like, "Come back here, Miss Tupsy. You don't want these deviled eggs and cookies go to waste. They were a labor of love." Yeah, sure, they were a labor of love. You were trying to overfeed Gary. But of course, Gary makes it back to the alley that he first went to when he entered town, hides behind a trash can, where he sees one of the snails that he met earlier, and the snail's like, "Hey, you're the guy who doesn't like nachos." Yep, that's him, all right. And then Gary pushes this snail in front of her, and she mistakes him for Miss Tuftsy, so she takes the snail in instead, much to Gary's relief. I really like how the dialogue goes between that snail and the grandma. Like, the grandma's like, "Oh, there you are, Miss Tuftsy," and the snail's like, "Who?" And she says, "You must be starving." And yeah, that's basically it. And Gary's like, "Whew." And then Gary goes back to Bikini Bottom to meet up with SpongeBob. So then, after this whole search for Gary between Patrick and SpongeBob tries to hold back his tears, even though he realizes that he has become so neglectful that Gary is gone. And we get a moment or a quote from SpongeBob where I want to say that's a bit of a trivia goof to say, because here's this trivia goof. When Patrick is trying to comfort SpongeBob on the couch, Patrick tells SpongeBob to let it out. SpongeBob says he can't because when Gary left, he took SpongeBob's tears with him. However, earlier in the episode, a customer at the Krusty Krab is upset because she found SpongeBob's tears in her Krabby Patty sandwich. And this was when SpongeBob was still crying in the kitchen, and his tears are dripping onto the Krabby Patty. And that's where this customer realizes that too. So if Gary had taken SpongeBob's tears with him, he wouldn't be able to cry all over the customer's sandwich. So what does that mean? Does that mean SpongeBob doesn't miss Gary? Is that what they're trying to go for? But it seems as though SpongeBob really misses Gary, but you hear this error from SpongeBob saying that Gary took his tears with him. Like, that's a little bit of a goof right there. But it wasn't until Patrick says, "Wait a minute, SpongeBob! I found this inside the store. I found this in the supermarket, and it's full of this type of wood, this bossful wood." And then SpongeBob loses it to after Patrick Star says this to SpongeBob, and SpongeBob's like, "Gary loves bossful wood," and his tears come back. Like, literally. SpongeBob walks outside from his house to this billboard of Gary the Snail, and he tries to forget him at first, but he looks up at this poster board of Gary, and he literally begs for forgiveness. He wants to be forgiven for what he has done to Gary. And this was when Gary shows up from behind. Like, he meows right behind SpongeBob, and on top of his head, he purrs. And much to SpongeBob's relief, he is happy that Gary is finally home. Like, Gary found SpongeBob, but of course SpongeBob found Gary too. But literally, they're both reunited. Like, that is so heartwarming. Like, being reunited with your pets is probably one of the most heartwarming moments that has ever happened. SpongeBob and Gary reunite, and it's a heartwarming moment to see SpongeBob and his pet Gary to be reunited. And I really, really love that moment. And SpongeBob promises things are going to get much better between the two of them. He takes Gary home to get him something to eat, telling him he must be starving. And Gary, however, only replies with a deep denial, meow, stating that he is overfilled. I hope SpongeBob realizes that too. I hope he does. And that's the end of the episode. That is the end of Have You Seen This Snail? And I'm gonna say this, I enjoyed this episode real much. Like, there's even a closing credits where there's another Gary song called "Where's Gary" that is playing in the background of the credits. And it's a very good song, but you gotta admit, the Gary Come Home song by Stu really hits you deep for one of the most sad for the saddest SpongeBob song, in my personal opinion. And that is basically it. That is Have You Seen This Snail, otherwise known as Where's Gary? And I'll be honest with you, for a post movie SpongeBob episode and a SpongeBob SquarePants special, it is a very good episode. It is a good episode. I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this episode. In fact, when the episode was released, it garnered 8 million viewers, achieving the highest number of cable television viewers aged 6 to 11 years old for 2005, and of course received generally positive reviews from television critics upon release. And on top of that, IMDb even rated the episode an 8.3 out of 10. So that's a pretty good score. But other than that, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. I enjoyed the episode for the most part. Like, the voice casting was very good too. Tom Kenny as SpongeBob SquarePants was very good. I really enjoyed Tom Kenny. Even Amy Poehler as the grandma. Like, Amy Poehler is she did a fantastic job playing this old lady in the episode. Like, Amy Poehler was coming off the heels of Saturday Night Live as well. She also appeared in a Nickelodeon television show called The Mighty Bee. But other than that, I like how Patrick Star was able to help out too. You got Bill Fagerbakke voicing Patrick Star. You also have Clancy Brown voicing Mr. Krabs. And then, of course, Squidward Tentacles, who is the neighbor to SpongeBob SquarePants and Patrick Star, has a cameo in that episode, and he's being voiced by Roger Bumpus. But obviously, the highlight of this episode is Gary the Snail. Like, Gary is basically the true star of this episode, in my personal opinion. Tom Kenny voices Gary the Snail as well. And all these actors do a very good job. The music by Stu for the Gary Come Home song is very good. Very heartbreaking, in my opinion. The saddest song from SpongeBob SquarePants. And Animation itself is also good too. But other than that, that is basically a wrap on this episode. So anyway, what did you all think of the SpongeBob SquarePants TV special? Have you seen this snail? Did you like the episode? Did you not like the episode? Have you seen this episode? Was this episode okay? I would like to hear your thoughts. But anyway, that's a wrap on this episode. Thank you all for tuning in to Codovision. I am Mark Codo, aka Codoman, your Codovision host. Stay positive and keep on streaming.